We're on to lesson number 7 and lessons about Job part 5 in our series through Job. And we are today we'll be in a few different places in Job, but we'll start in Job chapter 7. And we're going to continue with the subject of Job's spiritual understanding. And that's one of the profound things, one of the special things about the book of Job is that it's a chronicle of what happened in Job's life and the response of his friends and the end result of what God did. But at the same time, there's much spiritual understanding to be gained through the book of Job, and also we get to then see what kind of understanding Job had in his own life. It just helps us in our own understanding. And so the first part here, the first point in this our outline today of under Job's spiritual understanding is that first of all, Job knew that man has an appointed time on earth. Job knew that man has an appointed time on earth. And these are things that when we have this understanding, when you have spiritual understanding, and that is what guides your life, these are the things that help shape your perspective. It really does make a difference in your life. Having this type of perspective, and these particular things, especially that we're looking at about Job. But Job knew that man has an appointed time on the earth. So when you accept that truth and just remember there is an appointed time on the earth for man to be here and man not to be here, that there is the time for there's a time for life, and then there's the time that death comes. And that's what we have. We're not guaranteed forever. And a lot of these tech company gurus and all that are putting millions of dollars into research and trying to figure out how to extend life or even achieve immortality, they would do well to take heed to the Word of God and recognize that no matter what they try, they are not going to achieve immortality as far as through scientific and technological methods, because God has set an appointed time for man on the earth. And now I'm thankful for technological scientific advancements that can help people extend their lives and maybe live better lives in certain ways and help treat things that maybe in the past couldn't be treated. So I'm thankful for all those things, but I don't go to the extreme of, well, we just got to find a way to achieve immortality in this human life. And what you find out is when you read the Bible, why would you want to achieve immortality in this human body anyway? So, and then the message this morning during the service is going to be from 2 Corinthians chapter 5 that talks about that shows the distinction between the body we're in now and then that this isn't the body we're stuck in. For Christians. And so why would you want to be stuck in this body? Why would you want to achieve immortality in this body when there's something so much better that is coming in the future? And there are times when we get reminded of the mortality of life. One of my coworkers got some bad news the other day that a friend of hers that she had lost touch with, I guess, over the last few years, but it was really apparently close to her and her family years ago, that her dad just suddenly passed away. He was having a lung transplant, and in the midst of the lung transplant, he passed away. And so, and it was just kind of a sudden hit that basically these were like second parents to her back at a point in time in her life. So there was that meaning and the recognition that he was, I believe, only 62 years old. And so her own father is right around, not too far from that age. And we were talking about that a little bit. I said, well, my in-laws are probably right around that. They're older than that. And then I said, my own parents are not quite that, but they're getting closer. They're actually they are pushing 60 in the next couple years. And so, what's that? Well, I mean, the reality's reality. So, but the point is when you have someone, well, and then you got, so I wasn't making I wasn't making any implications there of who's old and who's not, but the point is that when you have other people who are close to you, around that same age, you recognize the limited time you have in this life. And so Job here, in Job chapter 7 and verse 1, it says, "Is there not an appointed time to man upon earth? Are not his days also like the days of an hireling?" And so, a hireling is someone who's hired to do a job, and then they're done once the job is done. So they're not there. They're not someone who's just there all the time or for forever. It's basically a hireling. I'm hiring you to do this job, get it done, and you're gone. That's the way life is, that our days of life are like a hireling. They're here for a period of time, but then they are gone. And so the point here is recognizing Job's spiritual understanding of what he knew back at this time and the great insights he had, and then how we can also be reminded of these things, and we ourselves can benefit from the spiritual wisdom that is in God's Word. Turn to Job 14:5. Job 14:5. Job 14:5. It says, "Seeing his days are determined, the number of his months are with thee, thou hast appointed his bounds, that he cannot pass." Just remember, God is the one who is in control of the days of your life. Now, there's a lot of things people do to try to take control. There are different ways in which people try to end their lives prematurely and take control of their own life, and so it's important that we recognize that we need to leave the days of our lives in the hands of the Lord. Now that doesn't mean it's wrong. It's certainly a good thing to, whenever there's a chance to save a life, that we should do what we can to save a life. But there are times when a person is, they are coming toward the end, and they recognize, and it's important to leave that in the hands of the Lord. And so I remember from a church we were in Michigan, there was an older lady. I think it was a lady who was in just really bad state, and she was basically was not going to be healed of what she was dealing with. Her body was just shutting down because she was older than 60 and 62, but. Actually, she was quite a bit up there in years, and the family decided, we're going to basically, there's no sense in trying to just keep her breathing or keep her alive in whatever way. I don't know all the details of that, but they basically recognized her time on this earth is done, and so they decided to remove the things that were artificially, the artificial machines that are keeping her, at least keeping her essential functions going. But there was no hope of her necessarily recovering. It was just simply, it was time for her life was coming to an end. And I do remember after they did that, now she hadn't been responding. She was asleep. She was basically not really responding too much. And they took her off of that. And I remember them saying that she actually woke up and had that little interaction with him. I don't even remember who it was. You might remember who it was, but okay, all right. I just remember them saying that she had woken up and they were able to have that little bit of interaction with her before she did pass away. And I thought, isn't that just like, it just goes to show that life is in the hands of the Lord. Here she is hooked up to these machines and she's not responding, and then they decide we're going to take her off these machines, and yet they have the opportunity for her to wake up one more time and for the family to see her awake. And so I just thought, wow, that really, once again, shows of God's hand in how things work toward the end of life. And so those types of things, as far as whether or not people should be on machines and how long they should be, is not the point of this lesson today. It's those things are an individual basis. I will say the Bible teaches we should do what we can to save life when there's an opportunity to preserve life and save it. When someone is coming down to the end of their life, then it's up to each situation and who's involved as to what the best course of action is. But there are people, who literally decide to purposely end their lives just because maybe they got a diagnosis of cancer, or there's even in Europe, there's some disturbing things going on in Europe of people who are being allowed to end their lives because of, because they say, well, I just don't have quality of life. And that is really a selfish motivation. It's one thing when there's end of life decisions that are made, that you decide, okay, how long do I want to be kept sustained for a period of time? But then there's a whole other thing where literally someone even made a machine where people can actually get into this machine and it ends their life, and it also serves as their coffin. And there's many disturbing things regarding life, and a lot of that, life and death, and a lot of that is just simply a reflection of a lack of spiritual understanding that man has an appointed time on the earth, and we need to leave our days in the hands of the Lord. And it's the same thing regarding abortion. The issue of abortion is, and we're coming up, I think it's right about this time of year is the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, and so it's all that issue also comes into play, that when there is a human life in the womb, when there is life there, that life should be in the hands of the Lord. There's even people who push that if it can be shown in the womb that there is this baby's going to have some condition or be disabled or whatever. The thing is, there are even laws that are being passed that allow people to end the life of that baby just before that baby is born. And that is taking the days of a person's life out of the hands of the Lord and putting it in the hands of man. And that's the opposite of the biblical perspective, as it should be in God's hands. And so once again in verse 5, seeing his days are determined, the number of his months are with thee, thou hast appointed his bounds that he cannot pass. So what's interesting is, so I'm talking about the shortening of life, but here in this verse it's also not passing the bounds. You're not going to live any longer than what God wants you to live. I mean, you can have the healthiest regimen of diet and exercise, and you can do all these things, and those things are all well and good. But at the same time, there are people who have lived. They've done all these diet healthy things, and then they drop dead of a heart attack, or they die in a plane crash, or whatever. It's just all of a sudden, boom, their life is over. Or they were an avid runner, and so they did all these things to stay healthy, and then boom, their life is over very suddenly for one reason or another. And so a person's not going to live any longer than what God has appointed. This is your time on this earth. And so we can take great comfort in that fact that God has our days numbered. He has control over that. He knows the beginning from the end. Number 2, Job knew that the world speaks clearly of its divine creation. Turn to Job 12. Should be close to Job 12. Job 12 in verse 7. But ask now the beasts, and they shall teach thee, and the fowls of the air, and they shall tell thee, or speak to the earth, and it shall teach thee, and the fishes of the sea shall declare unto thee. Who knoweth not in all these that the hand of the Lord hath wrought this? And Paul would then expound upon that even many, many years later, about more than 1,500 years later, in Romans chapter 1 and verse 20, it says, for the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. If you just let nature teach you that there is a creator. I mean, the Bible tells us there's a creator, but just let nature teach you there's a creator. I mean, it's just a tremendous thing. We did finish, I think I might have mentioned last week or some recent time, we were watching this 3-part series on the Mississippi River and this documentary. And we did finish it. There were 3 parts to it. They start with the northern part where it starts in Minnesota and it goes down to, I don't know where they stop, somewhere past, somewhere around Iowa or so, maybe near the border of Iowa. And then you have then you go down through the heartland and go down through to St. Louis, and then they stop at St. Louis after the second one, and then the last one was the Bayou and getting down to Louisiana and points south of there all the way to the Mississippi River Delta. And so you just watch that, and you just let nature teach you that there's a creator when you see how God created things to function. One of the most fascinating things was this fox who had some young was going after a snake. I believe it was a garter snake, and it was basically, for a fox, that's a pretty easy meal. And but this mother fox, instead of just killing the snake, she gave her young the opportunity to try to get the snake themselves. And so they just run right over there. She calls her young, and they just take off. A couple of them, they take off, going just full speed over to where she is, and they just start doing. If you know how the foxes hunt, they kind of hop right in there with their. It's so neat to see, but. So they're doing that. They're just going like this toward the snake, and then the snake is striking back. But garter snakes are very little venom, and so they're not going to be of any harm to them. So it's much safer for her to allow her young to learn with a garter snake than, say, a more dangerous snake. And so I'm thinking, how does that mother fox know how to do that? Well, God created within that fox that instinct and that whatever other word you might want to use, but I would say that the instinct and to allow her young to do that. And just let nature teach you that there is a creator. I mean, that just doesn't happen. Foxes aren't on the same level as human beings where this fox is just running through all these scenarios in her head. I don't think that's happening. Now, animals probably are a lot smarter than we give them credit for, but at the same time, they're not on the level of humans where they're reasoning things out. They're embedded with instincts, and just they do what God created them to do. It just screams out that there is a creator. And so you don't have to be a scientist to know that there is a creator. And just look around. Look around and don't worry about the mocking of the evolutionists and atheists. They mock the idea of a literal 6-day creation. Why? I mean, what's so unbelievable about that compared to that everything happened over millions and billions of years? I don't know why 6 days is more absurd than 2 billion years or whatever number they want to put on it. There's just different ways that is mocked. Like, these are such dangerous people. I mean, if someone believes in a 6-day creation, I mean, these are just the craziest, nutty people. And so don't worry about that. There will be mockers, there will be scoffers, but their points of view are just as absurd as they think ours are. So it's even as far as that's concerned. And by the way, saying that there is a creator who designed animals and designed plant life and designed human beings to function in different ways, that's less absurd than just saying everything happened by random chance over the millions of years. So Job knew that the world speaks clearly of its divine creation. Number 3, Job knew that God is sovereign and is the source and authority of all wisdom. Let's go to chapter 12 and verse 13. Job chapter 12 and verse 13, it says, "With him is wisdom and strength, he hath counsel and understanding. Behold, he breaketh down, and it cannot be built again. He shutteth up a man, and there can be no opening. Behold, he withholdeth the waters, and they dry up. Also he sendeth them out, and they overturn the earth. With him is strength and wisdom. The deceived and the deceiver are his. He leadeth counselors away spoiled, and maketh the judges fools. He looseth the bonds of kings, and girdeth their loins with a girdle. He leadeth princes away spoiled, and overthroweth the mighty. He removeth away the speech of the trusty, and taketh away the understanding of the aged. He poureth contempt upon princes, and weakeneth the strength of the mighty. He discovereth deep things out of darkness, and bringeth out to light the shadow of death. He increaseth the nations, and destroyeth them. He enlargeth the nations, and straighteneth them again. He taketh away the heart of the chief of the people of the earth, and causeth them to wander in the wilderness where there is no way. They grope in the dark without light, and he maketh them to stagger like a drunken man. So this is about God's sovereignty and that he is the source and authority of all wisdom. Back in verse 13, with him is wisdom and strength. He hath counsel and understanding. And so what God decrees, what he decides to do in how he raises up nations and raises up rulers and puts down rulers and nations, he's the one who does that. Those who in human eyes would be the smartest, the wisest, the counselors, God can make them look foolish. He can make the foolish in the world's eyes look wise. And so God can do all these things. He is sovereign, and Job knew this. Number 4, Job knew that man's life is of few days and full of trouble. Job 14:1. Job 14:1, it says, man that is born of a woman is of few days and full of trouble. Continuing on in verse 2, he cometh forth like a flower and is cut down. He fleeth also as a shadow and continueth not. And this is an important perspective to have in life, because we recognize that man's life is a few days. That really, when you put everything together, it's just in the whole realm of history, our lives are not that long. How long does this last? Does this life last? Well, compared to the big picture, thousands of years, not very long. And my wife and I were talking about this last night. We were discussing, someday if the Lord allows us and we get into a position where we're able to buy a house, and my wife said, really, I said, boy, it just feels like it's going to take a long time to get to the position where we could buy a house, or maybe, sometimes feel like even never. But she said, well, even if we're here in this apartment for 8 years, really, that's not that long. And I said, well, really, that kind of is a long time. Now, compared to where else we've lived, that is a longer time. But I'm thinking of in terms of if a person lives to 80 years old, 8 years in one place is 10% of the life. So you just live 10% of your life in one place. Now you still have the other 90%, but I've already spent 20 of that. We've already spent 20 of that in the growing up years. So that's a big chunk percentage as well. And so really, we should recognize the shortness of life, not to make us fear or afraid or insecure, but just to recognize that to help us increase our faith in the Lord, that our days are in God's hands. So no matter how long we have on this earth, that it is in God's hands, and that the days that God gives us on this earth are meant to count for Him, that they should count. We should try to have a full life, not full in the way the world looks at a full life, but a full life that we know we're in the middle of the will of God. That is the main thing, to live life where you're in the middle of the will of God. And so no matter what it looks like in the world's eyes, was your life a waste? Was your life just squandered away because you didn't take part in so many things the world has to offer? That doesn't matter. What matters is, are you accomplishing God's will for you day to day, month to month, year to year? And that's the most important thing. Are you staying faithful to the Lord and what He has called you to do? Number 5, Job knew that there is a heaven. He knew that there is a heaven. And Job chapter 16 and verse 19. Job chapter 16 and verse 19, it says, now also, behold, my witness is in heaven, and my record is on high. And so he recognized that there is a heaven. We'll come back to that verse for the next point. But I'm just going to go over this fairly quickly. But the first heaven, there are 3 heavens. The third heaven is where God lives. Paul talked about being caught up to the third heaven in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, and that's the dwelling place of God. The first heaven is Earth's atmosphere, as we see in Genesis chapter 1, verses 6 through 8. We have the second heaven being the universe where the stars dwell, and then further out from that is the third heaven, which is where God's throne is. and what we now call paradise. And so Paul called it paradise, being caught up to the third heaven in 2 Corinthians 12, verses 2 through 4. So Job had this understanding that there is a heaven when he says, "My witness is in heaven and my record is on high." I'm just going to turn and read Psalm 11 in verse 4, not too far away from there. But Psalm 11 and verse 4 says, "The Lord is in His holy temple. The Lord's throne is in heaven. His eyes behold, His eyelids try the children of men." And so when the Bible says heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away, we're talking about the closer of the heavens. Not God's dwelling place is not going to pass away, but the closer aspect of the first and second heavens. These things will be changed. These things will not be as they have been, particularly the first heaven, and the earth itself will be changed and pass away. And there'll be a new heaven and new earth and New Jerusalem. And number 6, the final one for today, back in Job chapter 16 and verse 19, Job knew that God was his witness. "Also now, behold, my witness is in heaven, and my record is on high." So he's appealing to God here. Because notice in verse 20, he says, "My friends scorn me, but mine eye poureth out tears unto God." And so here we covered this, I believe, last week, but Job directing his cry and his prayer, keeping his focus on the Lord. So his friends are scorning him, not being a help to him, but he is looking to the Lord. He's pouring out his tears to the Lord. And then he says, "My witness is in heaven, my record is on high." So he's appealing to a higher power. He's appealing to God to, I guess you could say, vindicate him in the midst of the accusations of his friends and the way they were treating him. He's just looking to God. God knows the truth. He's the witness. He knows no matter what my friends are saying. And turn to Job 31 and verse 4. Job 31 and verse 4. "Doth not He see my ways and count all my steps?" And so, speaking about the Lord, he's once again recognizing God, seeing His ways, counting His steps, that there is a witness in heaven, someone who's keeping track of his life, and someone who has the final say in his life as well. So the one who is the witness and has the true testimony, regardless of what his friends are saying. And so those are parts of Job's spiritual understanding. So this was a man who really knew some things. He really understood some things spiritually and about the Lord, about heaven, about life, and just about creation. And those are the basic things that we need to make sure we have the right biblical perspective, the proper perspective like Job had here, and that's what empowers us, or not just necessarily empowers us, but that is what is at the root of our hearts and our lives so that we can live a life with spiritual understanding. And that does affect then the day-to-day perspective and the maybe the things we do, or maybe things we would say to others, and maybe the attitudes we have, maybe emotions we experience would be affected by this spiritual understanding that we have. And this is maybe a little sneak peek into the message this morning, but it's the difference between the way a lost person looks at life and a saved person looks at life. When you have this spiritual understanding, the way you respond to life and then to death, whether it's recognizing the shortness of our own lives, or if it's the death of a loved one who you know was saved, that changes the perspective, that changes the outlook on how we view things, and maybe the emotions we experience, where you might have the grief that comes of losing a loved one, but at the same time, if they were saved, then you have the reassurance, and you can take joy in the fact that they are with the Lord. And so that's where these perspectives that Job had and this spiritual understanding really goes a long way to help increase our faith. And that's what the point of Job is the book of Job is. It's a faith-building book. It's something to help even no matter what you're going through and no matter what you struggle with, that no matter what trials, it's a faith-building book. And these points of spiritual understanding that Job had are also faith-building, knowing there's an appointed time on the earth, that God is the one who appoints the boundaries of man's life, and that there is a Creator, and that God is sovereign, and He is the source and authority of all wisdom. So all these things that we've looked at today should help us increase our faith in the Lord and live with more confidence and trust in the one true sovereign God.